Hey guys, it's Mike the Lionheart Ryan here. Did you know that the odds of your child growing up with autism are now 1 in 68? Please help support the fight against autism by going to talkforautism.com and donate today. All proceeds will go to the National Autism Association. Talk for Autism until every piece is found.
Steve Deloach, and you're listening to the Deloach Approach right here on WNLM. We have got a fabulous guest tonight. Charles Key is with us, and Charles is really an expert on the Oklahoma City bombing. That happened 20 years ago, and for some of our listeners, that may have been when you were young or maybe even weren't even alive. I remember Charles talked to us a few moments ago and kind of gave us a story as to where he was and what was going on when the bombing occurred. I remember where I was. On April 19th, 1995, I was here in Guyana. And I was at the hotel with my family. We were sitting out by the pool. The girls were in the water. They were having a great time. I got up to walk inside the building and walked past a television set and saw this large building that had the entire front face had been bombed away. My first thought was that I was looking at footage of Beirut and the Cobalt Towers that were bombed there. That was the first thought, and that is exactly what it looked like. There was this large multi-storied building that looked like something had just come down and scooped away the middle of the building from top to bottom. About halfway back. And there was all this debris and smoke. And I kept walking because I just thought it was an old report. A little later, I came back and saw the building in the background and people, and I saw the words live, and I started watching with interest. At that time, I didn't know it, but I had a friend in that building who lost her life. Charles knew people in that building that lost their life. And so as time went on, I became very interested in what was taking place. Now, let me give you another rundown of the timeline. At 8:30 on that morning, on April the 19th, Timothy McVeigh was seen in a truck driving a Ryder truck, and there was someone with him, and there were several witnesses that saw that. At 9:02, the bomb detonates. At 10:20, less than an hour and a half later, McVeigh was stopped for speeding with no tags and was arrested for a concealed weapon. 2 days later, he was arrested by federal authorities. At 3 p.m. that afternoon of the bombing, there was a thunderstorm there, and that kind of broke off rescue and search efforts as well. And at 4 p.m., President Clinton addressed the nation concerning the bombing. On April 24th, 1997, 2 years later, Timothy McVeigh's trial started, and it ended on June the 2nd, about 6 weeks later, and McVeigh was convicted. And on April the 29th of the same year, 1997, Terry Nichols' trial opened, and it closed the day before Christmas Eve, December the 23rd, also with Terry Nichols being convicted and sentenced to life in prison. On April the 27th, 1998, Michael Fortier was sentenced to 12 years in prison. On June the 11th, 2001, Timothy McVeigh was executed. His body was cremated. There was no autopsy. On January the 20th, 2006, Michael Fortier is released and placed in witness protection. I found that interesting, too, that he was placed in witness protection. Now, these were the only three men that were tried and convicted of the Oklahoma City bombing. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but we've got a caller right now. Tim, are you there?
Yeah. Yes.
Welcome to the show. Do you have a question for us?
Yes, thank you. And for one, I'm honored to be able to speak with Charles and Steve and Lisa and everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me on here. And just really quick, pardon my ignorance on a lot of the knowledge in the background of the Oklahoma bombing. However, my stickler that I wanted to raise the issue up was Tim McVeigh used as a patsy? Was he part of that patsy scheme by the CIA and all that stuff, or am I going off the deep end here?
Well, excellent question, and let's start with how Tim McVeigh comes into the scene after the bombing, just north of the Oklahoma City area on Interstate 35. A highway patrolman pulls over Tim McVeigh in that yellow Mercury Marquis, and Tim McVeigh has a weapon on him. And so Tim McVeigh pulls over, and when the police officer comes up to his car, he says, "I just want to let you know that I've got a weapon." He informs him he's got a weapon. Tim McVeigh telling the police officer. And then the police officer asks him to get out of the car. They go through the typical routine. McVeigh was very courteous. He didn't try to resist. He didn't pull his gun out and try to shoot him or anything like that. He just said, "Hey, by the way, I'm carrying a weapon." And, and then he let him take him to jail. And so as much as in addition to other evidence, that question has been raised. What was Tim McVeigh's role? Another interesting thing that one will find out from not just information that's out there, but through defense attorneys that represented Tim McVeigh and other public records, is that Tim McVeigh's sister, Jennifer McVeigh, who was also seen downtown by witnesses prior to the bombing, and this is several days or a week before the bombing, with Tim McVeigh and other people, which probably was Michael Fortier and someone else, is that Jennifer McVeigh had a lot of knowledge about this, and that she very well might have been protected by McVeigh and used as a threat against McVeigh for retribution or for actions being taken against her by the government if he didn't cooperate. There's even information that McVeigh, when he allegedly left the military, and I'm going to say it that way because there's some really good evidence that he never really left the military, that he actually went into a special unit or section that did drug interdiction and even assassinations of drug lords and things like that for the government. And so there's some really good, credible information that McVeigh didn't just simply leave the military like people do and go off into the private world and private life, that he was still working with the government in some capacity. So I don't know that. We don't know that. We've tried to stay during our course of the investigation strictly on, kind of like Joe Friday, the facts only, and let them tell us and dictate to us what we can know for certain. But there are very reasonable questions and evidences and information that would raise the question of McVeigh not being just somebody that was mad at the government like the government portrayed. Frankly, I don't believe their case in that respect.
Wow. That's really stunning.
Well, now here's my question. Originally, they said there were 2 Middle East suspects. Then they started talking about this John Doe number 2. But eventually, they came back and said, no, Timothy McVeigh acted alone. Weren't there witnesses that saw 2 people at the truck that morning?
Well, yes. In our report, you guys have copies of it. We start off in that report talking about the preliminary hearing, or the probable cause hearing is referred to in the same way in cases all over, throughout history. You have a case that is being brought to the public's attention in a court, and it's called a probable cause hearing, meaning the government's saying we've got probable cause to hold this person over for trial. He's being accused of these things that we're claiming. And so when McVeigh was taken into custody and discovered up in the Perry, Oklahoma prison, a county jail up there, they took custody of him and they flew him down in a helicopter back to the general metropolitan area of Oklahoma City. Just west of there, there's a city called El Reno, and there's a federal prison there, and they had their probable cause hearing and preliminary hearing, and that federal prison. And in that case, in that hearing, the government laid out its case for justification for holding this person over for the alleged crime of blowing up the bombing and killing people. And the government's whole case that they laid out was based on eyewitness testimony. And all of those eyewitnesses saw McVeigh. They claimed they saw McVeigh, but they also saw McVeigh with someone else. So the government's case was based on eyewitness testimony, which they saw McVeigh and at least one person with him. Some saw more than one.
Well, Janet Reno even went on television and said that John Doe number 2 was to be considered armed and dangerous.
The John Doe 2 question is really interesting. There is a ton of information. In our report, we lay all this out in chronologically and in other ways about the John Doe witnesses. And then we address it from, well, who are the potentially who is the other John Does? And I say plural John Does because there's not just one other John Doe out there. Mm-hmm. There's more than one John Doe.
Well, and Fortier's role was what?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure just what Fortier's role really was. He had knowledge. He had some level of knowledge. And so the government used his association with Nichols and McVeigh to be a witness against them. And his knowledge, his alleged knowledge and participation was based on, they were planning on blowing up a government building and, et cetera. Here's what their plans consisted of. Mm-hmm. But there's many other witnesses.
Right. He obviously had enough culpability because he had some culpability with the actual crimes themselves, or he wouldn't have gotten 12 years.
Yeah. Well, yes, but still yet, why didn't Terry Nichols get the death penalty? And when that federal trial took place in Denver, you had immediately after they only gave him life imprisonment, you had a press conference by the jury on that trial, and the jury for a woman, it was a female named Nikki Deutschman, she addressed the press, and I'm sorry I'm not better prepared for remembering this, but it's in our report there. That's why we wrote it, because 20 years later you want to have the facts out there. And she clearly said that it was a lack of a case made against Terry Nichols, involvement in the bombing to the level of Tim McVeigh. Mm-hmm. And that was the reason they could not, in good conscience, give him the death penalty, because there were too many unanswered questions, because it was clear there were other people involved and many other questions. Even the Judge Richard Mage, said that publicly in court in the sentencing of McVeigh. He said, something to the effect that we hope that you will be more forthcoming in the future of the others unknown and the other aspects of the bombing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say this because I literally mean this, but for the reasons that the government had, they wanted a very tight case. They wanted to make it McVeigh and Nichols, with Fortier being a witness that knew it was going to take place, and make it an open and shut, clean case. And I'm going to say this, and we put it in our report, the details of why this is not just reasonable, but likely. The reason is because there was prior knowledge on the government's part that this was being planned and carried out, and they failed to stop it. And it both literally and figuratively blew up in their faces.
All right, now wait.
Just to finish that, one more statement.
Uh-huh.
There were government undercover agents, and we know that from the government's own field reports, ATF field reports, that we include in that report, that prove and show that there were those that were infiltrating groups and that knew that there were plans being made to bomb that building, and that they failed to stop it. And so when you follow the trail of the John Does and all the other information, you're going to come up with government knowledge that should have been to a level that they were able to bring these people in, take them into custody before the bombing happened. But they didn't do that.
That begs the question. If the government had prior knowledge, why didn't they stop it? What is your theory there?
Right.
Well, that's the $1 million question, so to speak. Clearly,